Well, hello and welcome to this edition of FOP-TV On Demand. We're going to have a discussion today about qualified immunity, what it is, what it's not, and some of the movement across this country to try and eliminate qualified immunity for police officers. So with us today is myself. My name is Patrick Yoes. I'm the National President of Fraternal Order Police, and also with us is Larry James, our General Counsel for the Fraternal Order Police. Larry, welcome.
Good morning and welcome to be here, Pat.
All right, tell us a little bit about your background.
I've been a general counsel for the National Fraternal Order of Police since '01. Before that, I was safety director. My entire life, my last 2 years of law school has been involved with various aspects of police work and police operations and defending police in various civil litigation.
Okay, so today's topic is we're going to talk about qualified immunity. What is qualified immunity and what it's not? Qualified immunity does not. This is, there's a belief across this country that qualified immunity is much of what the problems are in policing today. And when they call in for police reform, they want to eliminate qualified immunity for law enforcement officers and not really looking at the bigger picture of what it's going to cause in terms of our ability to be able to do community-oriented policing. It's going to make it difficult for officers to be able to react, but I think there's a misconception here. So let's talk about what qualified immunity is. Qualified immunity does not protect bad cops. Bad cops can still be disciplined by their agency. They can be reported to state credentialing agencies. They can be terminated from their job. They can be arrested for criminal charges. They can be indicted by a grand jury, and they can be found guilty by a jury of their peers and sentenced to prison. Qualified immunity is a legal precedence set by the United States Supreme Court that sets a legal standard for police officers when they can be civilly sued in the performance of their duties. So it basically, all this perception that law enforcement officers somehow are protected by some veil of qualified immunity is simply not the case. Is that so, Larry?
That is correct. It only relates to civil litigation where an officer or a public official, I shouldn't say officer, I should say any public official, whether that's the prosecutor, the governor, a director, a city council person, a legislator, a judge. It relates to all public officials in their discretionary duties that they hand out every day. So what it simply is done in the civil litigation context, it says, the officer or public official is sued and the agency is sued. What it allows is to let the officer out of that litigation. It does not terminate the litigation. So if it's a question about training or some other aspect, but what it does, it eliminates the officer from the litigation, eliminates useless discovery, but that is what qualified immunity does, but it relates to all public officials, firefighters, police runs, you name it, it comes into play.
And it is. You bring up a very interesting point, Larry, that a lot of the people who are engaged in this discussion about eliminating qualified immunity, themselves are protected by qualified immunity.
That's correct.
Question of removing their qualified immunity because they think it's important to their line of work, but somehow recognizing, or they recognize or feel that there's a problem with qualified immunity. So let's talk a little bit about what qualified immunity is and why is it important. You identified that qualified immunity, you gave the parameters of it, but the reality is that not everyone gets qualified immunity. Qualified immunity has to set a set of standards. A person has to operate under in good faith and under the color of the law. So if they're violating the law, then qualified immunity doesn't exist. So there's a process. Let's talk about a little bit what that process is and what the courts have decided on qualified immunity over the years.
So when a lawsuit is filed, traditionally, we'll see in litigation I'm involved right now, the governor's name, the director's name, and certain individuals who may be carrying out certain policies. In order to have qualified immunity, you cannot knowingly violate the law. You cannot have gross negligence. A sufficient clear policy needs to be established. that policy then needs to be violated by that police officer or public official, and there has to be no prior precedent. So an officer, when we see in the situation of Atlanta or other related situations, should qualified immunity operate as a defense if that individual is sued? And in that case, one would say, yes, it's probably going to operate. That does not mean it terminates the litigation, though, Pat. What it means is that officer may still be in the litigation, and at the end of the day, that officer cannot be held liable if he or she has acted in good faith in compliance with past precedent.
Right. And the courts have, that's this process is the courts will review whether or not qualified immunity is granted. And in a recent study of 200 lower cases, lower court decisions, qualified immunity was only granted to 57% of the time, which meant 43% of those who claim qualified immunity did not receive it. So it shows in itself that the system is actually working. It's not a guarantee that that officers are going to receive qualified immunity. It's going to be based on a totality of the circumstances for each individual case, correct?
Correct. I mean, I think that when I hate to use this phrase, but litigation today is basically file suit against them all and let God sort them out. Well, that's what the court is doing. It's clearing the path to saying who are the real defendants. So the officers acted in good faith in complying with the law according to how he or she was trained. And if that is the case, the officer is going to be granted qualified immunity. And again, as you said, the statistics are pretty evenly balanced, and it works. The system works.
Yeah, even in the Supreme Court, the 5 cases that made it to the Supreme Court ruled in favor of all 5 cases for qualified immunity, and it wasn't, at least in 2 of them, it was a 9-0, 9-0, 8-1 decision, which suggests that there was really no division in the Supreme Court in recognizing where the line was of qualified immunity. So I think that in itself proves that the system does in fact work. So
it's not a controversy. I think it's a clear, articulated precedent. When you look at the history of the court, and particularly the Supreme Court, within the last 3 months, the Supreme Court of the United States had 12 opportunities to review whether they were going to revisit this issue, and they chose not to.
Right. And again, qualified immunity is vitally important for our ability to be able to, based off of good faith and in the standards of what we do in law enforcement, to be able to interact and not have that personal liability associated with it. Eliminating qualified immunity puts officers in a very precarious situation. And as such, it will likely result in less interaction with the public, because technically every interaction with the public could end up in a lawsuit. Is that not correct?
That is absolutely correct. And I think there are different themes out there to say, why should we eliminate qualified immunity? And I haven't seen any compelling reasons to do that. It's not going to improve policing. It really is not going to have an effect on the day-to-day decision, because if you're an officer out there and you believe in good faith, your action is warranted, you're going to take that action.
Right.
And if you're in a situation of shoot, don't shoot, your decision in a split-second decision is whether I'm going to exercise my good faith judgment and do my job, or am I going to put myself in danger and the public in danger, or my colleagues in danger.
Right. So Larry, at my request, you put together a document, talking points for our members and not only our members, we're engaged in this discussion in state legislation, where the buzzword is eliminate qualified immunity. And you put together a document that creates some talking points for qualified immunity, helping educate people on what it is and what it's not. Could you talk a little bit about the memo that you've created, the talking points, and how it could be beneficial to our lodges and unions across the country?
Yes, because I think there's just been a misnomer. Even when I was talking to my wife and our sons, they think as a result of qualified immunity, police officers can't be disciplined, they can't be terminated, they can't be sued. That is just not the case. And I think that simplistic response is laid out in this document. I think the other thing that needs to be talked about is we're talking about discretionary actions of officers when you're talking to the public, and you can cite examples of when you're exercising that judgment. But not only as police officers, whether it's firefighters, whether it's teachers, whether it's legislators, whether it's governors. And the issue, if you start taking away qualified immunity, then it leaves these officers exposed and any public official exposed. So the idea of the good people coming to law enforcement of public jobs is going to have a chilling effect, number one.
There's no question. And we're looking right now, last year, over a year ago, PERF did a review on applications for new hires and found that it was more than 60%, 65% reduction in the amount of applications that were coming in. So we were already in a crisis mode in attracting the best and brightest in law enforcement. The qualified immunity changes, it is going to absolutely have a chilling effect. A recent study by our poll, unscientific poll, but a poll by one of the police publications showed that of people in law enforcement, over 100,000 law enforcement officers responded, and less than 7% would recommend a friend or a family member enter law enforcement. So we can see that this trend is affecting law enforcement. It's going to have some long-term consequences, and qualified immunity is a key piece to this whole equation. Eliminate qualified immunity to law enforcement officers. Now a person coming into law enforcement has to decide whether or not they're exposing their family to litigation and in essence hurting their family themselves. So this is a very important factor, and more important for us as members across this country to help educate the public of what it is and what it is not. So that memo is available. How do you receive a copy of that memo? When we complete when you complete this webinar, this episode, it is going to be automatically emailed to you, so you'll get a copy of those talking points, and we encourage everyone to go out in their communities and help educate the public and our members on what qualified immunity is and what it is not. More importantly, create ambassadors. Have them go out and also spread the word on what clearly define what qualified immunity is and how it does not protect bad cops. It is a legal precedence that exists not just for police officers, but it exists for public officials at all levels. And so, just as state legislatures and even Congress is having discussions in the legislature about qualified immunity or anything for that matter, they themselves are protected by qualified immunity. They recognize the importance for it there. It has its role. It needs to be in those positions because they need to have free and open discussion in creating laws and not be held liable for it, just as much as law enforcement officers. When they do the right thing, they follow their policies and procedures and laws, that they should have a protection by qualified immunity as well.
And I think the other thing, Pat, is that when an officer or any public official operates outside the scope of their authority and their duties, or they abuse that, the government entity is going to cut them loose. They're not going to defend them. So if government is doing their job and you have an officer or any public official who does something incorrectly, it's the checks and balances are already there. I'm representing a public official right now where the government entity said, we will not provide any defense or any indemnity to that officer. So those checks and balances are already there.
Yeah, you're right, Larry. And then I appreciate that. And so this will wrap up this episode of qualified immunity. And again, I encourage everyone to go out and help. Let's educate the public. Let's educate our members. Let's all become ambassadors to spread the word about qualified immunity, what it is not, but more importantly, how it could have such a major impact on the ability to have law enforcement officers across this country. We're going to be proactive in terms of trying to deter crime and trying to get out in front of it. It's going to take public interaction, and know that our public interaction across this country is over 1 million a day, and very, very seldom do any of them turn into anything that you see on the evening news. But the reality is, by taking away qualified immunity, we have the potential for really every one of those becoming some type of lawsuit, and because of whatever reasons. So it definitely puts a very chilling effect on our ability to be able to be effective law enforcement officers. So I ask you to stay tuned. Every week we're going to push out a new FOP-TV on demand. You'll be able to register, log in, listen to timely topics on a weekly basis, and you'll be able to do them at your timeline. You get to set it when you want, but every week we will release a new topic. So thank you very much for watching. I wish you all the very best. And these are some very difficult times, but we are professionals. This is not the first time we found ourselves in some crisis situations. And law enforcement officers, we've always done what's needed to do in order to be able to protect our communities and protect our livelihood. So thank all of you for what you do, and I appreciate your attention today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.